The purpose of this lesson is to learn about controls, how to examine the IDE's automatically generated code, how to set controls fonts, how to use link labels, how to add color to a form, how to use checkboxes and radio buttons and add those to a form, how to add pictures to a form, how to use the list box, combo box, and checked list box, how to use the month calendar and date time picker, how to work with the form's layout, how to use menu strips, and other types of controls. Every control that we add to our form, things like buttons, labels, list boxes, text boxes, anything like that, those are all controls, and one thing you need to realize is all of those actually come out of a class which is defined by text. Alright, so what we're doing is we're using a class called system.windows.forms.control, and we can actually place a line at the beginning of our code that will allow us to use that. So we can say something like using system.windows.forms. What this would do for us is allow us to call these different class objects without actually having to type out the fully qualified name for them. Alright, so what happens is whenever we make a new form, we're going to have the form itself. The form is a type of control. Then we add things to it like a label and a button and so forth. And so what we have here is we have a type of control called a form, and then we also have a label, and we have a text box here. And the question is, well, what exactly are they? Well, they're nothing other than code. It's just simply code behind the scenes. So somebody has designed the class for us for these particular objects, and all we have to do is call them. Alright, so what happens is behind the scenes, the system will actually create these lines of code for us. So we'll get something like this where it says private system Windows forms dot label, and then gives it a name. And then every time we have a button, it adds a name for us. This is OK button. Now behind the scenes, it's adding all of that for us, but we could actually create these objects without dragging and dropping if we wanted to. Alright, so what happens is everything that we add to the form will show up in the designer.cs file related to the particular form that we're using, and the system will automatically create these elements for us. Alright, so if I'm going to use the drag and drop environment, the question would be, why do I care? Well, the answer to that is going to be, if I accidentally delete a button and it doesn't delete all the references to that button, my program won't open. Or if I rename a button and not everything gets renamed, my program won't open, and so forth. So there will be some times when I will have to go into the designer and actually change it so that the designer knows exactly what the name of the form is, the name of the button, and so forth. Alright, so what we can do is we can play with things like fonts. We can play with the size of the font. To do this, though, we have to instantiate a new class of the particular font. So for this example here, we have system.drawing.font, and they give it a name called Big Font, and it set it equal to new system.drawing.font. And then if you notice here, this is a constructor for this particular font object. And the constructor takes in two attributes. One is the name of the font, and then the other one is the size of the font. Now notice the F, this is a floating point value that we're sending to it. Then what we can do is once we declare a new font programmatically, then what we can do, I'm sorry, not a new font object programmatically, then we can call it. So we can say something like this.label1.font equals, and then whatever big font is. And we can change the font for the OK button. We can also do this through the properties window. So if we have a particular item, we can specify the font here, and if you click on the plus sign, you can specify individual items. But if I want to programmatically do it, then what I have to do is I have to declare a new object to hold the information for this particular font class. So we can do things like set the font type, we can set the style, the size, if it's struck out, underlined, all the basic features that we expect when we go into Word or any other program to be able to change the size of the font. We can use bold, italic, we have regular, strikeout, which is going to have the line all the way through it, underline is going to put a line underneath of it. We also have these things called link labels. Now, link label is like a label, but it allows us to do things like underline something. What this is going to be is like a hyperlink to somewhere else. So yes, it's a link, but when you click on it, then it will take on some actions like what you expect to see in your browser. When you click on a link, how it changes color to signify that you've already gone to the site, and so forth. Now, when you double click on them, you're going to get the default event for it. And the default event is going to be the event that most users expect to occur when they click on it. All right, so when I click on it, my options are going to be things like active link color. So what color do I want it to be? What is the link color before you click on it? What's the color after I've gone to the site? What's the color if I've been to the site but I haven't been back to this page before? And then what's the color when I click on it? Now, if you've ever played with old websites that had the blue hyperlinks and you click on them, when you hold down the mouse button, you'll notice they turn red. And then when you let go, they go back to a bluish purple color. And then when you go to another site and you come back, then it turns a purple color. Those are the default actions. All right, so the link label is going to appear as underlined text. It is blue by default because it's going to signify that it's a link. And it's going to take a click. So when we have a click option on it, it will actually allow us to interact with it. So here we have a form that has two links on it. One goes to course technology, one of them goes to read our policy. Behind the scenes, what we have is the option to start a process called iExplore. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create this link, and when you click on it, we're going to launch Internet Explorer. Now this is what's called an API to Internet Explorer. It's built into the system. It does it automatically for me. And then what I want it to do is I want it to open Internet Explorer and then go to this particular website. Now the other option is I could also tell it that I want it to pull something up. Now this @ sign signifies that we're passing a path to it. And then so what will happen is it knows that, okay, they want to pull up this particular file, so it'll open up the file instead. Now when I pull up a file, it will use the default handler for Windows, which means that if I have Notepad associated with the text files, that's the program that's going to open. If I have Notepad++, that program will open, and so forth. All right, so we can also specify after somebody clicks on it, we're going to change a flag to state that they went to the site. All right, so what you'll notice here is that we have a property for the link label 1 object, and the property is link visited, and we can set that to true. And now what happens is when we set that to true, it will automatically change the color, so that way somebody can tell, okay, it's purple, I must have already gone to this. We can play with the color class also. Now the color class, this is going to allow us to play with colors, and we have the ability of changing foreground colors and background colors. Depending on what the object is, will dictate what background color is and foreground color is. Sometimes the background color will be just that, the background color. Sometimes the background color will be a highlighting. Sometimes the foreground color will be the border around an object. Sometimes the foreground color would be the color of the font. Just depends on what we're playing with. We can use things like checkboxes, which you've probably seen these before. This is going to be where I give you a list of things and I tell you check each one that you want, and you can select as many of them as you want. And then we also have radio buttons, which are similar, but a radio button is going to be something where you can only have one selected at a time. Now for these to work, we're going to have to put them inside of a group object. All right, so what properties do we have available to them? Well, we have the ability to check them. Each property will have text, and then we can check to see if it's changed. And if, let's say I have 3 options for, let's say I'm talking about the size of pizza, and I want you to select one of those. So I have small, medium, and large. And if you click one of those, I can call a method. And the method is just simply check changed. And what that means is that instead of having to put a button to say, hey, I selected one of them, as soon as you change something, the system will automatically know that you changed it, and therefore it'll kick off an event for it. All right, so in this case, we do have the pizza order form. On the left side, we have the checkboxes, which means I could select all of these or none of these if I want. On the right side, we have dining options, and we have pickup, delivery, dine-in, and I can only select one of these because the radio button only allows one to be selected at a time. All right, so the way that we're going to handle this is we're going to use if statements. So if the box is checked, then we're going to add something to the price. So let's say I have a pizza, and a small is $6, a medium is $8, and a large is $10. And then each topping is an extra $1. So I'm going to tell you pick a size, and you pick medium. Okay, so the pizza is $8. Then what I want to do is if you check the box for sausage, I'm going to add $1. If you check the box for extra cheese, I'm going to add another $1. If you check the box for green peppers, I'm going to add another $1, and so forth. So if I select sausage cheese, and green peppers, then it's going to be my $8 plus $3. So that's how we're going to calculate our total amounts. All right, so in this case here we have the pizza order form. So what happens, you go through, you select the toppings that you want, then you select the dining room options, and then it will show to us the total amount down here at the bottom. All right, so once again, we're going to have to do things like if we deliver, we're going to have to calculate that in. Okay, so how much is it to deliver? Well, in this case, they charge a delivery fee of $2 if you have them deliver it. So if the button, deliver radio button dot checked, so if it's checked, then we're going to take whatever the price of the pizza is and add the delivery charge. Else, if you're going to pick it up, you save $2, therefore we're going to subtract $2 from the price. Okay, now we don't necessarily need to subtract $2. Let's say we're just going to leave it the regular price if you pick it up and only charge if we deliver it. So in that case, we'd only have to have an if statement. We also have these things called picture boxes, which a picture box allows us to place a picture on our form. And we can put bitmaps, icons, JPEGs, GIF files, any other image file type that is supported by Windows, we can place inside of a picture box. And we have the ability to select the image, we can set the size, so we could stretch the image out to the full size. Let's say I want to have a background picture on my form. I can do that by using a picture box. We will play with that. But then I can also, because the picture is an object, I could also give an event. So if you click on the picture, then we want it to do something. All right, so we're going to play with the picture box. The picture box looks just like this, and you have a little handle that shows up at the top here that actually has controls. And when you click on this, it'll allow you to do things like set the image, set its stretch size, and then we can also do what's called a dock. So we can dock this to a corner, we can dock it to the middle, or we could stretch it out to the full size of what's called the container object, or the parent object, which would be the form. All right, so when we add a picture box to a form, we're going to have to select the image. Now here's the catch. I can't just simply call a file. One of the things you need to realize with Visual Studio is everything that we use, all of the resources that make up our program, have to exist in the resources folders. So our project folder that exists under My Documents, / Visual Studio, / projects, / whatever the name of our program is, all of our stuff has to exist there. So if I have a picture on my desktop that I want to use as part of my program, then I can't just simply use that picture. I have to import it into my project. And what it will actually do is it'll import it into the folder, and it's going to give it an extension of .resx. It's a resource, and so what you'll see is the name of your file .resx. And once we import it, then we're actually able to have it show up on our form. Now we also have controls called list boxes, we have combo boxes, we have checklist boxes. What these allow us to do is to place multiple lines of items on the screen that are text-based and allow the user to select more than one thing. You've probably experienced these before when you go to a website and it tells you to select all of the items that you want and you have to hold the control key to select more than one thing. You're going to be using one of these types of objects to be able to do that. Now what happens is we have to specify if the user is allowed to select more than one thing. We can specify how many they can select, and we can also do things like sorting. Alright, so we have properties here where we can specify what the items are that are in our what's called a collection, how many columns there are. If we want some of them already selected, we could specify which ones are automatically selected. We could also specify how many things you can select out of the list. We can sort it, and then we also have a method which is the selected index changed. So if you select something, then we can kick off something else behind the scenes. Alright, so what these would look like would be something like this, where I would click the first thing, hold the control key, click another thing, hold the control key, click another thing, and I can select more than one thing at a time, and each one turns blue. Alright, we also have the ability to do extended sets. So you can use the shift key, you can use the control key, and the arrow keys on the keyboard to be able to select multiple items at the same time. There's also the possibility that nothing is allowed to be selected. So let's say I just simply want to give you a list, but I don't want you to do anything with it. I could do that also. Alright, so now in this case, what they've done is they've made it where they are sorted vertically or horizontally. And so I'm going to make you scroll down through the list or scroll across through the list. Or we could also just simply specify that you have them all in one long list and they all show up on the same screen. So we actually have the ability to fill it. Excuse me, a combo box is a drop-down box. This is going to be something where I'm going to allow you to select this little box. It has an arrow beside it. And when you click the drop-down, you'll get something like this where you have to select an item from the list. Now, in a combo box like this, we don't have the option of selecting more than one thing by default. We can change it programmatically if we want to, but if you're going to do something like that, you're better off using a combo box. We also have these group objects where I can group things together, and then what I can do is I can select multiple things and it knows that they belong to a particular group. Some other controls that we have are going to be things like the month calendar and the date time picker. These are things that would allow you on a form to either have the user type the date in that they want to select an item, or they could bring up a calendar and they can select the date from the calendar. If you've ever used a website where you have to book a hotel reservation, or if you've ever tried to get airplane flights or anything like that, you specify the beginning date and the ending date, or the arrival date and departure date and so forth. Those things are going to be using this type of control. We have the ability to specify the maximum date that you can use out of the control. So let's say, let's actually go with the min date. What I want to do is I want to make a form for scheduling an appointment at a doctor's office. Well, if I'm going to make a program for doing that, do I want you to be able to schedule the appointment in the past? No, I don't. So what I'm going to do is something like set the minimum date to whatever today's date is. Therefore, you cannot accidentally schedule an appointment in the past. We could do the max date too. So let's say we have a hotel and the maximum stay is 1 week, and you tell me that the check-in date is this Friday. Well, then I won't allow you to stay past next Friday. All right, so programmatically, we're going to create a new string value called new date, and then we're going to specify it as being the calendar picker. Now, what this is going to do is it's automatically going to pop up the calendar for me. I select a date, and it will replace the date with whatever date I selected. So what will happen is it's going to just simply take whatever I selected out of the calendar and put it into a text string. It's no different than typing it. So what happens is I have the string value called new date, you selected plus, and then month calendar 1 dot selected start dot 2 short date strings. So these are just different formatting options for it. And what we're doing is we're just simply going to call it, let it pick a date, and then we just substitute the text in instead. All right, so in this case, you selected whatever date, and then we figure out what 10 days from now or from that date would be. All right, we also have the date time picker, which works kind of the same, except this one gives you a drop-down box. So now I see this on the form, and when I select the arrow, then I get a calendar that pops up, and it functions pretty much the same way as the month calendar does. Now, though, what I can do is I can change the foreground color, background color. I can specify the format for the month. All right, so when we play with things on the form, I've shown you throughout the semester that it will automatically try to line things up for you. You end up with what are called snap lines. And a snap line is just simply going to try to line things up and show me when they're aligned. This is going to be where when I drag label 2, these two lines will show up. There are also the pink snap lines for text. I've showed you when you add a label in a text box, you have to let go of the label, then drag the label again to get that pink box so that the text inside of it lines up. So the blue is going to be the outsides of the object line up. The pink is going to be that the text that is contained inside of the object lines up. I have the ability to anchor things also. We can anchor things to the middle of the screen. We can make them a fixed distance away from other items or from the edge. We can also dock things. So what happens is, by default, when I drag things into my form, they're just kind of floating in the middle of the form. But if I want something to be snapped to the top left or the top right or the bottom left or the bottom right or anything, I can dock it there. And then when I dock it, what it will actually do is it will stretch it out to the size of the container object. Now this is going to be useful if I want something like to make a web browser, or to make something like notepad or something like that. Then we also have what's called a padding property, which if you ever played with HTML is kind of the same thing. This is going to be space from the outside edge of your object to whatever's contained inside of it. So if I'm putting text inside of my text box and I want the text to say so many pixels away from the edge, then I can specify the padding for that text box. Alright, so the way that this works with an anchor is we can actually specify where we want it anchored on the form relative to the parent object. Alright, so in this case we have two labels. They're both snapped, or both anchored, sorry, to the top left and the bottom right corner of the form. And when you resize the form, they will automatically move based on the size of the form and where the edges are. Now I also have the ability to dock something at the bottom or the top or the left or the right, and I can even dock something in the center, and it just depends on which one of these I select. So this is top, bottom, left, right, and center, or I have the option to not dock it at all. Now in this case, if I select the bottom one here, then if I create a button, then the button itself will be docked to the bottom of the form. We have group boxes and panels. Now a group box is going to be used as the container object for our radio buttons and our check boxes. And what it will do is if I put some labels, some radio buttons inside of a group box, it will automatically put them together as one group of objects. If I add 20 different radio buttons to a form and I just dump them all in the form wherever I want, they all belong to one group of radio buttons, which means I can only select one of those 20. But if I take and put those into group boxes, then what I can do is I can select one radio button per group box. So the group box is going to allow me to specify, hey, these items belong together and only one of these should be allowed to be selected. But if I have another group box, then I can select an item out of there. Now the group box, we're going to give it a name. We'll have some sort of title to it. Then we have what are called panels. Now the difference between a panel and a group box is that our panel is not going to display a caption, but it can have scroll bars. Okay, so where am I going to use a panel? Well, we use a panel for things like I want to put a bunch of buttons across the top of my form, or if I want to put some link text across the bottom and I want them evenly spaced, I'm going to use a panel for something like that. We also can use menu strips, which you've used these before. This is going to be your file, edit, help, things like that menu. And to create a menu strip, we have to draw it out by using the form designer, but then afterwards we have to add code for each of these, which means that when I draw an object, when I draw one of my menus, in this case we have a menu called font, and then it has the ability to type another item here. Well, when I start typing, what it will do is it'll start populating things on the screen saying large, small, and so forth. Well, these are just simply menu items. They don't do anything. To make them do something, I need to specify the default action for them, which means that I have to double click on it, and when I double click on it, then I get a default action, and I have a section of code where I can actually specify what happens when I click on this. Alright, so in this case we have large and small, so if I click on large, programmatically behind the scenes there's a method that is dictating what would happen when I click large, and it will automatically make this a large font. That can only occur if you double click on this when you're designing it and add the code behind the scenes. We have other types of controls that we've played with, and we're going to keep playing with other ones throughout the rest of the semester, so keep watching and I'll show you some of the ones you can play with. Alright, I'm going to teach you how to make a real functional program. Alright, so what I want to do is I'm going to make a new project here. It is going to be a C# Windows Forms application, and I'm going to call it Launcher. Now, what this is going to be is a program that will actually allow me to have multiple little sub-programs in it. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to make this little window that pops up that will ask us what we want to do. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to add some buttons to it. So I'm going to just drag 4 buttons over here. And this first button, I don't want it to look like this. I want it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to stretch this, make it bigger. And then what I want to do is I'm going to copy this, because then when I paste it, I'll have other buttons that are the same size. So I'm going to paste 4 of these. Okay, so I want to paste these equally spaced. You'll notice I get my little handles here that they snap up and they're going to be aligned right. And so what this will do for me is it makes my program look nicer. Alright, so I want to do some things that people typically expect in our new programs. We don't expect to see this blah gray background anymore. We expect to see something that looks a little bit nicer. So over here I selected my form, and what I want to play with is going to be my back color. And so back color right now is set to control, and instead of that I want to go over to custom, and we're going to set it to white. And you'll notice that the background is now a white color. Alright, then I also have the option of setting a background image, and if I do the background image, then I can import a picture. Now I've stored pictures under my lessons folder, so I'm going to pull it up from the actual lesson folder itself. So I've browsed to where I have my pictures stored, and I want to import this program group. Now when I pull this in, you'll see that it actually pulls it in as part of our resources.resx file. Now the reason that there's two of them listed here is I've already previously imported this, but I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. And the problem that I have is when I do this, I'll end up with this picture tiled, or I could have it where the picture is stretched or something of that nature. So this may not necessarily be what I want. Alright, so I'm going to try to tile it. No, that's not going to work right. Center it. No, that won't work. Stretch and zoom and so forth. Now what this is doing is just simply specifying how it's actually going to display the image. The problem that I have is that I don't necessarily want that picture just to be right there. I want to specify where it goes. So to do this, I'm going to have to use what's called a picture box. So I'm going to drag my picture box over here, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, just so that I have a nice space to put my image. And then I have my little handle up here that I can click on, and will actually allow me to choose the image. Now I already have this picture, so I can go ahead and just select it again. Otherwise I'd have to click import. Go ahead and click OK, and there's my picture. Now you'll notice though that the box here will actually cut off the image. Okay, so I may not necessarily want it this way. So what I want to do is I want to dock it, or I also have the ability here to set the size. And what I want to do is I want to stretch the image. And now by stretching the image, what that's going to do for me is make it where it stretches it out to whatever the size of this container object is, which in this case is going to be my picture box. Alright, so here is my picture, and there we go. Now I'll make the size of the 4 buttons that are there, resize the form a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer, and then now we have our picture. So what it would actually do is when I run the program, it will embed that picture right into the form. Now you'll notice I have something else here. It says Form 1, and we use this default Visual Studio icon up here. I don't necessarily want that studio icon, and I don't want it to say Form 1. I need to remember to rename things. Alright, so this is going to be pardon me, our Form 1, and I'm going to rename this to FRM main. Yes, I want to rename other objects related to it. And then Form 1, I want to give that a name. We're going to call it Launcher. And this is going to allow me to launch other applications. Alright, so my launcher here has 4 buttons, and I want to make it where when I click on any of these buttons that it will automatically do something. Alright, so how am I going to do that? Well, I have to double click on it, and that makes our default event action for each of these. Okay, so now I have default actions, but you'll notice there's button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. Alright, so button 1, I don't want it to be button 1. What I want this one to be is to say hello. So I'm going to call this CMD say hello. And then behind the scenes for button 1, we still have button 1 sitting here. Okay, but we don't have a button 1 now. We have CMD say hello. So the problem is because I double clicked on that, I created an event for it. So instead of it being button 1, I need to change it to CMD say hello. Okay, so now I have a method for it, which also means I broke my program. Alright, so the question is, how do I fix it? Well, I could fix it by putting this back to button 1, and now it works. So how do I fix it? Alright, the way that I fix it, I'm going to come over here to the events, and instead of this being button 1 underscore click, it's CMD say hello. Now, if I look, I no longer have a button 1. I'm sorry, I do actually still have the button 1, but I can delete it now. But I also have a CMD say hello. Okay, so now if I delete this, Now if I go back, it still works. And the reason that it works is because I don't have anything that's looking for button 1 underscore click. I have things looking for, say, hello underscore click. Alright, so my first button here is button 1. The text is button 1. I want it to say hello. Alright, so what this is going to do is this is going to call a section of code that is just simply going to give me a message box that is saying hello and my name. Alright, so I'm going to type in for my section of code for this. I want a control to pop up, something that actually pops up and gives me a message, and this is called a message box. And to get the message box, I have to show it. And you notice there is actually a show option here. And then when I open the parentheses, I can see that there are 21 different ways that I could call this thing. So 21 different overloaded methods. And if I start clicking through these, you'll see that we have something like an owner and a string, and then we have a string and a caption. This is the one that I want to play with. All right, so what we're going to say is this program created by, and type your name in here, comma, and then what do I want the caption to say? The caption is going to be hello. Alright, so now what I've done is just simply create a little section of code that when you click on the say hello button, it will pop up a message box this program created by, and it says hello up here. Notice it says launcher. We're going to get to changing that icon there. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to make a button that calls up another screen. And I want it to have a window that pops up that will automatically, or not automatically, but will allow me to change the colors of things. So this button here, the text for this is going to be radio buttons and checkboxes. Alright, and what do I want to do with this? It's going to be CMD, radio buttons and check boxes. Alright, so now I have button 2 still has a button 2 click event, so I need to fix that. So it's not going to be button 2, it's going to be CMD, radio, buttons, and check boxes underscore click. And when I do that, now I get a new method here, so now I can safely delete button 2. Okay, so that still works. But it only works because I've renamed the actual event here. Alright, so I now have something for say hello. It pops up a message box, and I want this thing to open up a completely new form. And the way that I'm going to do that is I have to create a new section of code to hold the form. Well, before I can do that, I need the blueprints for what that other form looks like. I need an object class. Okay, so before I can actually do anything with calling another form, I need to make the form. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to right click on Launcher over here, and I'm going to add a new Windows form. Okay, so what kind of form do I want? I want a Windows form. What do I want to call it? Down here I'm going to call it radio checkboxes. Sorry, FRM radio checkboxes, and click Add. So now I have a new form that I can play with. You'll notice that it's a blank form that is completely separate from the one that we've already been using. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to put some checkboxes on here that you can select pictures to show up on the screen or not show up, and then I want some radio buttons so that you can select the color for the screen. Alright, so what I need to do is I need to provide all of the checkboxes with some sort of group object to hold on to them. Alright, so I'm going to use a panel, and I'm going to use a group box. And so I'm going to have to go to All Windows Forms, and I'm going to select Panel, and I'm going to select a group box. Okay, now remember, these both function about the same. The difference is going to be that my panel does not have a header on it, or a caption on it. So this is my panel, this is my group box, and my panel is allowed to have a scroll bar, whereas a group box is not. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I want some checkboxes over here, and I'm simply going to copy and paste these just so that I make it easier on myself. And then over here I want to have some radio buttons, so I'm going to go down and select radio button and copy that, paste it twice. And I want to make sure these are all nice and neat and lined up. All right, so now our group box, I need to give this a name, and I also need to give it a caption. So the caption here is going to be select background color. All right, and then I need to give it a name. Well, if you look on Blackboard, you will see that the prefix for a group box is GRP, and in this case, I'm going to call it background color. All right, so there's my group of objects. And this thing over here is a panel, and the prefix for panel is PNL. And then this is going to be which pictures do you want to see? So we'll call it PNL pictures. All right, now this does not have a caption over here. This one does have a caption, but they both get a name. All right, so my checkboxes here, we're going to give these names. And a checkbox is CHK. And then what do I want to call it? In this case, I'm going to have picture 1. And we're going to call this, for the text, picture 1. Do the same thing here. This is picture 2. This one's picture 3. All right, and we need to rename them. This is CHK picture 3. This one is CHK picture 2. All right, so now I have all of the options for my pictures. I'm going to resize this to make it a little less wasted space. All right, so then these over here, these are radio buttons. Now, a radio button only has a 2-letter prefix. This is R or B, and then we're going to make this white. So let's actually go and put the text for it. So I want to make the background color white. This one here is going to be green, and this one here will be red. All right, so this is RB red. This one is RB green. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to put some pictures down here at the bottom. And to put the pictures here, I can put them in a picture box, or I could just simply add them to the form. And what I want to do is I actually want to make it where my pictures are at the bottom, but I don't want to show them right away. All right, so I'm going to add a picture box down here. It's a little taller. And I'm going to copy this and paste it twice so we have it, 3 of them. And I want to make them evenly spaced if I can. We're going to need to make our form a little bit smaller here in just a minute, because it's a lot of wasted space for this that doesn't really need to be wasted. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to specify that if somebody selects picture 1, that picture 1 will actually show up. And if they select picture 2, then picture 2 shows up. And if they select picture 3, then picture 3 shows up. Alright, so what am I putting into these as pictures? So I'm going to select my image. I need to import it, and this is image 1. Okay, this is going to be image 2, so I need to choose my image, import it. Now that's image 2. Okay, and then this is going to be image 3. So import it, image 3, and then OK. Alright, so now what I need to do is I need to change the size of these so that they're auto size. Sorry, not auto size, I don't want to stretch them. Okay, so now it's stretched. I want to stretch this one. And then this one I want to stretch also. There we go. Alright, so what I want it to do is I want it to only show the image if I select the box above for the image. And if I don't select the box up here, then I want the image to go away. So by default, I don't want these to be visible. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the visibility of all of these to false. All right, so now I have this is here, this is here, this is here, but they're not visible. So it means if I run this program that I should be able to have the form with no pictures show up. The problem is I don't have any way to call this form yet, so I can't even check it right now. I need to change the name of our form too. I forgot to rename that. So I'm going to change the title box. So radio and checkboxes. Oops, change the wrong one. I need text to be radio and checkboxes. Alright, so now what I want to do is if this is selected, then this shows up. If this is selected, then this shows up. If this is selected, then this shows up. And so what we're doing is this has a default action of if this is changed, then we can cause it to do something. So for its default action, I can double click on it, and you'll see now we have CHK picture 1 underscore check changed. And what I'm going to say is if the checkbox is checked, then we're going to show the image. If it's not, then we need the image to go away. So what I'm going to say is if CHK picture 1 dot, and then if you go down through, you'll see that we actually do have options that are available to us, and one of those is checked. So if this is checked, then what we want to do is we want picture 1 to be visible. Alright, so what did I call picture 1? Alright, so here's picture 1, and it has a name of picture box 1. Okay, so now I need to give this a name. And so what I'm going to call this is picture box 1, picture box 2, picture box 2, 3, and I want to give them their proper names for the prefix. What makes it real easy on us is a picture box just simply has a prefix of pic. So I'm just going to call this pic 1. We'll call this pic 2. And we'll call this pic 3. Okay, so back to the code. If the box for the first picture is checked, then I want to show picture 1. So what I can do is I can look at pic 1 dot, and it has all of its properties. And remember, initially we turned off its visibility. And so what I want to do is I want to set this equal to true. So if we check the box, then we're going to change its visible property to true. Else, we're going to change its visibility, so pic 1 dot visible, we're going to set that equal to false. So that way if I uncheck the box, it's not visible. If I check the box, then it is visible. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing with picture box 2. So if CHK picture 2 dot checked, then we're going to take pic 2 dot visible and set it equal to true. Else pic 2 dot visible is equal to false. Do the same thing for the last one here. So if, in this time it's CHK picture 3 dot checked, then we're going to take pic 3 dot visible and set it equal to true. Else pic 3 dot visible is equal to false. Alright, so now what I'm doing is just simply stating if you check the box, make picture 2 visible. If it's not checked, make it not visible. Now if I had left off the else, what would happen is the first time I check the box it would make the picture visible, but when I uncheck it, it won't take the visibility away. So I have to specify both states for them for it to take it away. Alright, so now my form, the next thing I need to do is if you select one of these options over here, then what we're going to do is we're going to specify what color the background for the form is. Only one of these can be checked at a time. Now our if statement is going to be a little bit different for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to state that if the color white is selected, then the background color is white. Else if the green is selected, then the background is green. Else if the color selected is red, then the background is red. Alright, so what we need to do is we need to make it where all three of these, if you change one of them, then it will automatically change the background color. Alright, so I'm going to specify here, so if RB, and then this is white that we're playing with, dot checked. So if it is checked, then we're going to change the background color. Well, what do we change the background color up? And think about our object. Whenever we talk about an object, our object of a form has attributes and methods. And I want to change the background of this particular instance of this method, of this object. So I'm going to change this dot, and then we have a back color that we can play with. And then we're going to play with what's called colors. So it's a function called color dot, and what color do I want it to be? And so now what this will do is it'll allow me to change that if we change this checkbox here, then we will automatically change the color. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing for my other two buttons. So if RB green dot checked, then this dot back color is equal to color dot green. And then the last one is going to be for red. So if RB red dot checked, then this dot back color is equal to color dot red. Now, you may encounter some situations where you do have to actually fully string together if this, else if this, else if this. It just depends on the layout of your program, but for this one, this would be sufficient. But if you get some unexpected results, then you may end up with the exact same code for all three of these. So that way, if you change any of them, it automatically kicks off that little section of code. Alright, so I'm going to do save all. I have everything saved. So now what I need to do is I need some way that I can call this form and make it actually appear. Alright, so back on my main form, I want to change this radio button and checkboxes, which we already have an event for. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our new form, the FRM radio checkboxes, and we're going to create a new instance of that object. To do that, I actually have to specify that I'm calling or creating a copy of that instance. So just like when we created instances of our automobile class or our student class or any other type of class, we have to do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I have this class of objects called FRM radio and checkboxes, and I want to call this. Now the problem is I want to play with this thing by a variable name. Alright, so what I'm going to actually do is I want to rename my actual class object. And because this would be an instance of my particular class, so I want to rename this, and I'm actually going to get rid of FRM. Yes, I want to rename everything. Alright, so now what that does for me is it makes it where radio checkboxes is the class. That'd be like saying automobile. And I'm going to say radio checkboxes, and I want to call this. So I'm going to call this by FRM radio checkboxes, and we're going to set this equal to a new instance of radio checkboxes. Okay, so what that does is it allows me to call this thing. We're going to make a new instance of it. But what happens is behind the scenes it actually created it, but it didn't show it to us. So we need one more line of code that says FRM radio checkboxes, and then we're going to show it. So dot show, and we're going to use a method to actually show it to us. So now what that'll do is it'll instantiate it here, and then it will show it to us down here. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. When I click say hello, I get my message box just like we had before. When I click radio buttons and checkboxes, I get a new form. Alright, so now my new form here, if I select picture 1 shows up. If I select picture 2, it shows up. If I select picture 3, it shows up. And I can have any combination of these on or off, and that'll dictate which ones actually show up. Then over here on this side, when I select these, you'll notice the background color changes based on the one that I select. So now I have the option to change the background color. I can change the pictures, and only the ones that I actually select would show up for the pictures, and only one of these can show up at a time for the colors. When I'm done, I can just simply X out of it, or I could have put a button here that will close the form, and if I do something like that, then I can do something like this dot close for my button, which we'll play with more for the next section. All right, my button 3, I want this one to be, this is going to launch a timer. So we're going to put timer there, and this is going to be a CMD timer. Okay, I need to change this default click event. This is going to be CMD timer underscore click. And so now I have a click method for that, which means I can safely get rid of the button 3 text here, or code. All right, so now I have, for the timer, I want to make another form. Okay, so I'm going to make another form over here. Right-click Launcher, Add Windows Form. It's a Windows form, and in this case it's going to be timer.cs. And notice you have to type the .cs or just simply don't delete it. All right, so I'm going to make this one, and it's called timer, and I'm going to make it timer and counter. All right, in this case it's going to be just simply called timer is what is being called here, because that's the name of our class object. All right, so what I want to do is I want to add some controls to this. I want 2 buttons, and what I'm going to do is I want to make it where I have a stopwatch, something that runs that will start counting and stop counting. So this button here is going to be CMD start with just simply text of start. And this one here is going to be CMD stop, and it's going, I'm sorry, this one's just simply stop for the text, and the name is going to be CMD stop. All right, and then I want a label here. I want a label that I want my label to be a timer. I want it to be counting up from 0. And try to change the wrong thing. This is LBL timer. Okay, so what I want to do, actually I'm sorry, this is going to be LBL counter. Timer is the whole thing. All right, so what I want to do is I want to make this thing start at 0. So I'm going to put its text as 0, but then I can change its font size and its font face and so forth. So what I want to do is I can either select them individually here by expanding font, or I can click the picker over here. And so I want this to be bold. I want it to be, say, like 24 point. Let's go a little bit bigger because we could do 36. That works. And then OK, and there is my counter. That is the number that's actually going to count up. All right, let's make it even bigger than this, because we can go a lot bigger. It'll take my click. Let's say like 72, make it twice the size. There we go. All right, so now what I want to do is I want this thing to count. I want it to start at 0 and I want it to go up. And for me to be able to do this, I have to use a timer object. And you see over here I have a timer, and if I double click this, it gets added, but it gets added down here at the bottom. And so what we're going to do is we need to specify for this timer object, this is what's called a listener sitting behind the scenes. It is going to be like a metronome for us. And it counts in milliseconds, and by default the interval over here is 100. If I change this to 1000, that is 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. So 1000 milliseconds makes up 1 second. All right, and this is a timer, and so we're going to call this, let's see, TMR count. So we're going to call it. And what we're going to do is in our code here, I want to provide some code here for the start button that it will start the counter. And then what happens is every time this counter ticks, remember it's like a metronome, I want it to increase this number by 1. And then I want to stop the timer here, and then when we stop, it should stop the timer here. So it should set its enabled value to 0. All right, so I need an action for the start button here. So what we're going to say is something like TMR count dot, and then what I want to do, I want to enable it, and we're going to set that equal to true. All right, so that's to start it. Then to stop it, we're going to say TMR count dot enabled is equal to false. Okay, so that stops it. So what actually causes this number to increase? Well, the timer itself is what does that. All right, so I'm going to double click on the timer, and it has a default event of tick. And what it's going to do is every time it ticks, it's going to do something. It's like clicking a button every second. All right, so imagine I clicked a button and every second I wanted to increase the number by 1 that is on the timer. Then what we're going to do is we want to take whatever's there and we want it to increase that number. All right, so what we need to do is we actually need to have some sort of number to keep track of the time, and then when we keep track of the time, then we're just simply going to keep changing the label to whatever that amount of time is. All right, so I need an integer value, and I'm going to call this int counter, and we're going to start it off at 0. And then every time the timer ticks, we need it to increase. All right, so imagine this being a time. If I click this, then what happens is it would set the counter to 0. Every time it ticks, it sets it to 0. All right, so this actually isn't going to work here. We need this thing to be a public variable for us. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make a counter up there, or the integer value up there. And then what I want to do is I want to add 1 to whatever is in that each time this thing ticks. And then I want to change the label for counter, so its text value. I want to set that equal to whatever value is in the integer. Now the problem is the integer, I can't just simply put it into a text string, so I have to convert it first. I'm going to convert to string. And what am I converting? I'm converting int counter. All right, so we have a public variable that's set to 0 when the form shows up. We're going to take and increment the counter by 1 every time this timer ticks, and then we're going to increase the value on the screen to be whatever is actually showing there. All right, so the thing is that I don't have anything yet that will actually show that to me. So on my form main, when I click on CMD timer, I need it to create that. So what I'm going to do is I make a new timer object. I'm going to call it FRM timer and set that equal to a new timer object. So it's new constructor. And then I want to take FRM timer and I want to show it. Okay, so that's what will happen when I click on the button on form main, when I click on timer. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it, go to timer, and when I start this, then what will happen is this thing will start counting, because start just simply enables the timer. When I stop it, it doesn't reset the timer. It just simply leaves it alone, but it stops the timer and leaves the count alone. And if I start it, it'll keep counting from here, because all it's doing is just simply incrementing a public variable to keep going from there. So stop it, it stops. Make an X out of this, X out of here, and then we have one more button to play with. Button 4, I want to make a pizza store, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a program that we can actually select a size of a pizza and some toppings. So button 4 is going to be for the pizza store. So let's go ahead and rename it first. Okay, so this is going to be CMD Pizza Store for the button name. And then my event is not going to be button 4 click, it's going to be CMD Pizza Store _ click. And now I have a new method for CMD Pizza Store, which means I can get rid of button 4 because that no longer exists. Alright, so the pizza store is going to open up a new form. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new form over here. And so we're going to add a new Windows form. It's going to be a Windows form, and I'm going to call this pizza store.cs. Go ahead and add it. And here's our pizza store. Now I'm going to make this larger. And what I want to do is I want to have some controls for what kind of items the user wants to have. So we're going to have a list of pizza sizes over here, a list of toppings over here, and then we want to be able to keep track of exactly how much this costs. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I want to know what size pizza it is, which means I need to have a radio button for that. So I'm going to make a group box. Alright, so here's my group box. And I want to call this select pizza size. And then our group box gets a name of GRP pizza size. Alright, so we have the select pizza size here, and we're going to have some radio buttons that will actually be used to select the size of the pizza. So we'll have a small. I'm going to copy this and paste it a couple of times. And we're going to allow for a small, medium, and large. Now the way that I'm going to do this is going to be small, so this is RB small. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for the text here, state small, and a small is $6. So that way I can change the text. Alright, so then radio button 2 is going to be a medium, and this one's $8. So I'm going to call this RB medium. And then this one's going to be RB large. And then its text is going to be large, and these are $10. Okay, so the text here where it says $6, $8, $10, that's just strictly for the end user to know what the price is, but it does not in any way actually dictate the price of the pizza. We're just simply making these radio buttons with text that state what the price is. Alright, so I'm going to put another group box over here, and this group box is going to be for toppings. And so we're going to make these the same size. Notice I can use the handles. Alright, so the text here is going to be extra toppings. And these are $1 each. Now what this is doing is it's just giving a textual view to show to the user, hey, the items that are here are going to cost you an extra $1 for each one. Alright, so I'm going to use some check boxes in here. And I'm going to line my check boxes up with my radio buttons over here just to make them look nicer. So I'm trying to use the handles here to get them all nice and neat and lined up. That'll do it for me. Alright, and then, there we go. So now that's lined up. So now I have my check boxes, and a check box is just simply CHK. Now this first one's going to be for sausage. Okay, so the actual text will be sausage. Then the next box here is going to be for pepperoni. So this is CHK pepperoni. And then this last one will be for extra cheese. So this will be CHK extra cheese. And then the text will be for extra cheese. Now there are other types of structures that we could use for this. So we could put a list box here, or we could put a combo box or something like that. But this would be just real easy to look at real quick. Alright, the next thing I want to see is when was this order placed? So I'm going to bring a date time picker over. And the date time picker is just simply a control where I can click and actually see the date. So let's say they're allowing call ahead. Maybe I want to have this delivered on Monday. Then what we could do is we could specify from the list when it should be delivered. Alright, so I'm going to put over here a label. And the label is just going to be delivery date. And then now what you can do is you can select from this drop down box here, select a date, and then that will dictate when it should be delivered. Okay, so what we want to do is we want a button that would calculate the total cost of our pizza. So we need a button. And we're just going to put it down here for now. We'll change this in a minute. Okay, so it's going to be calculate total. Now you notice the calculate's cut off, so I'm just going to make it a little bit wider, or I could make it taller, or both. So there's our calculate total button. And then what I want to do is I also want to make it where we're able to add a tip to this. So maybe the delivery person is going to be bringing it out, and we want to give them an extra tip, and they can call ahead for it, so we can add it. So I'm going to move this over here, make it look a little nicer. Okay, so here's delivery date. And notice that it didn't line up quite right, so I can use the arrows on the keyboard to actually move it around a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer. Alright, so there's the delivery date, and we want to make it where you can add a tip to it, so I need a label here. And this one's just simply going to be tip. Okay, and then I'm going to have a text box here where you can actually enter the tip. And once again, I have to move it afterwards. All right, so we're going to allow them to enter a tip, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger just so that way it's the same size as that box, just to make it line up a little bit neater. All right, and what I want to do is when we calculate the total, I want to display the total amount down here in a label. All right, so the label here, we're just going to leave it there for right now. But to start off with, it's $0. And I want to make the size a little bit bigger. So we're going to play with the font. All right, so let's make this like a 16-point font, bold, and then OK. So here's the total amount. All right, so what this will do is it'll calculate exactly how much this is going to cost. And then depending on how much it is, so like if I pick a medium pizza, it's $8. And then if I add sausage and pepperoni, it should be $9, $10 plus whatever the tip is. Now the thing is that we have a sales tax of 6%. So what we need to do is we also need to account for that sales tax when we calculate our total. Now when we calculate the sales tax is actually going to be calculated on the price of the item, not the tip. The tip and delivery charges and stuff like that, those aren't taxable. Only physical items are taxable. So we need to account for that when we actually calculate our price. All right, so if I choose a medium pizza and then I put 2 toppings, the price of my pizza would be $10. There'd be 60 cents worth of tax, so $10.60, and then I add the tip on top of it. I have to do it in that order or else I will actually have the wrong tax amount listed. All right, so we're going to start off just by simply calculating the total based on the pizza size. So to do this, everything is going to be done through the Calculate Total button, so I'm going to double click on it. It gives me my button one click, which means that I did not rename my button. All right, so what I need to do is go over here and rename it. So this is CMD Calculate Total. And then our event is also going to be CMD Calculate Total. And there we go. All right, so now we're going to calculate our total. So we need to work through this. First thing is we need to declare any variables that we need. Okay, after we declare variables, the next thing we need to do is we need to get the base pizza price. So what size did they select? Then we need to add the cost of the toppings. Then we need to calculate the sales tax. Then we need to add the tip amount to it. Then we need to display the total. As long as I can type it. All right, so this is our basic layout of the program, is declare the variables. Okay, so what variables do I need? I need a variable that will hold the total price of the pizza. All right, so that's going to be a double amount. And I'm going to call it DBL total price. And that's going to start off at 0.00. All right, so we're going to start off with the total price. We need something to hold the sales tax rate, so that's going to be a constant value, and this is going to be a double sales tax rate, and that's equal to 0.06. And then do I need any others? Well, we may. So if we do, we'll come up here and we'll add them. All right, so we need to get the base pizza price. All right, so the way that we're going to do this is we have radio buttons that are there, and we have to make sure that something was selected out of one of those boxes. All right, so what I could do is I could programmatically set the program here that it cannot calculate if none of them is selected, or we could, back in our actual form, we could automatically select one of these. So what we could do is there's a checked option here. We could set it so this is checked by default and make it start off as a small. So we need to choose which way we want to do it. Do we want to force them to pick a small if they don't pick anything, or do we want the program just simply to not do anything? All right, so I think what we're going to do for this one is we'll go ahead and just make this checked. So we start off with a small, and in that way we know that one of those is selected. All right, so what I need to do is I'm going to say if, and then I have my radio buttons that I'm playing with. So if it's small, dot checked. so if it's checked, is equal to true, then the price, which is going to be DBL total price, is equal to $6. Okay. Now the thing is that we're setting the total price to $6, but what we're going to do is we're going to keep adding to the total price. All right. So then if it's not the small ones, else if RB medium dot checked is equal to true, then DBL total price is equal to $8. Else if RB large dot checked equals true, then DBL total price is equal to $10. Okay, so that's all we're doing is just simply checking to see what the base price should be. It's going to be only one of these. Now for the toppings, what we're going to do with the toppings here is we're going to have separate if statements. And so if the sausage is checked, then we add $1. If the pepperoni is checked, we add $1. If the extra cheese is checked, we add $1. And if all three of them are checked, we add $3 extra. So we're not going to have else ifs here. They're just simply going to be if. So if CHK pepperoni dot checked is equal to true, then we're going to take whatever's in DBL total price, and we're going to add $1. All right, so that's it for that if statement. So if the checkbox for sausage is dot checked is true, then we're going to take whatever's in DBL total price and add $1. If CHK extra cheese is checked, then take whatever's in DBL total price and add $1. Alright, so keep going down. Now we're going to calculate the sales tax. Now to calculate the sales tax, we could do this as a multi-step program. I'm going to do it the long way, and then I'll go back and shorten it. Alright, so I'm going to make a double value here. And I'm going to declare it down here because I actually want to get rid of it in a minute. I'm going to call it DBL sales tax. And this is going to be equal to whatever DBL total price is times the sales tax rate. Alright, so if I choose a medium pizza, $8, and then I check pepperoni and sausage, then the total price is $10 times 0.06 will give me the amount of sales tax. And then the next thing I want to do here is I'm going to take my DBL total price and I'm going to add it to whatever is currently in DBL total price plus the sales tax. So I can say plus equals DBL sales tax. Okay, so this would be $10, this is 60 cents, so now we get $10.60. Now I could do this the long way like this, or I could just simply, I could add these together up above, or I'm sorry, down below here. So I could do something like plus DBL, sorry, this has to be in quotes, or parentheses, DBL total price times sales tax rate, like this, and then now I can get rid of that whole line. So just one less variable. So I perform a calculation, DBL total price, so this is $10 times the sales tax rate. This gives me my 60 cents plus the $10. And then, oops, I left that as sales tax. This is total price, which would make this actually equals. So DBL total price equals DBL total price plus the sales tax rate. But if I do this, I can actually get rid of this section right here and say plus equals. So this is now the same as DBL total price equals DBL total price times sales tax rate plus DBL total price. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to add the tip. Now, whatever they enter as a tip, you need to remember that this is a text box here. So this text box, we need to give a name so that we can actually use it. Okay, so this is going to be TBX tip. Alright, so we're going to take whatever's in TBX tip, and we want to go ahead and put that into a tip amount. Alright, so what we need is we need something to hold the tip. Alright, so I'm going to take a double, DBL tip, and we'll start that off at 0.00. Alright, so now what I need to do is I need to figure out what the tip is. So I'm going to start off with DBL tip is equal to whatever is currently in that text box. Well, it's tbx tip.text. The problem is that tbx tip.text is text, so I have to convert this. So I'm going to do a convert.to double whatever is in tbx tip, semicolon. Alright, so look at whatever's in tbx tip, look at the text value, convert it to a double and stick it into DBL tip. Then the next thing we're going to do is DBL total price, and we're going to add DBL tip. Okay, and then we need this label here is called label 3, so this needs to be named. So this is going to be LBL total price. And now what we're going to do is we're going to say LBL total price dot text. Okay, and what is that? Well, that's going to be equal to whatever is in DBL total price. Okay, now the problem is DBL total price is a double. So I could cast this, or I could actually do a string dot format. Alright, so what I'm going to do is DBL total price dot to string and format it as currency. And what that'll do is it'll take this, it converts it to a string. Now, like I said, I could have also done a string.format, but I do have this toString method that I can play with. It takes this, converts it to a string, and then it'll display the value there. Alright, so let's go ahead and try this. Now, the thing is right now there's nothing that will actually call this. So what I need to do is back in my main method here, my main program, pizza store, I need some sort of code to call that thing. Alright, so when I look at the code here, it's going to be just like the one up above. I have this thing called pizza store. That's my class. That's my blueprint. So pizza store, and I'm going to call this FRM pizza store. And that's going to be equal to a new pizza store object. Alright, and then I want to take FRM pizza store and I want to show it. So when I click on the pizza store button, we'll create a new object called FRM pizza store, which is an object of the pizza store class using the default constructor. Then we show it, and then we'll actually get our form. Alright, so I click pizza store. Alright, so we're going to start off with a medium, and I'm going to select sausage and pepperoni because I know it's $8, $9, $10. And then when I calculate the total, it crashes. And the question is, why does it crash? Alright, so now what you'll notice here is DBL tip is convert to. Now the problem is that we are telling it to try to convert something that I left as blank. And so I left the tip field blank, which means that it tries to convert nothing to a double and it can't actually do it. So what we need to do is in our code we need to fix that so it can't try to convert nothing to a double. Alright, so I have a couple of ways I could do this. I could specify that DBL tip is equal to 0, and then we take whatever's in that box and set it equal to 0. So we could have an initial value here of, let's see, text. So make this 0 to begin with. Okay, so this is one option, is to simply make it 0 to begin with. That way if you don't enter anything else, it treats it as that. But the better way to handle this is actually going to be to use our try block. So I'm going to try to do this. And if I try to do this and it works, great. Then if it doesn't, then we're going to try to catch it. Now remember, when we catch something, we don't necessarily have to do anything with it. We could just simply leave it alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to convert this thing. If it works, great. If not, catch it. And we could catch it as an exception and call it EX for exception. And remember, we can't simply call it E because E is actually used as the event args up here. So anyhow, I could try to catch exception and then do something like message box dot show, and then ex.message. Display that. Alright, so we can actually show what the error message is, and then that way it continues. But what I'm doing is I'm telling it, okay, we have an initial value here of 0.00, but if somebody actually deletes that, it would still crash the program. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and try it. That way we can't crash the program just by simply clicking that. Alright, so let's try it again. Pizza store. Let's do a medium, select 2 items, no tip. There we go, $10.60. Alright, so now I add a $2 tip. Calculate total, now it's $12.60. Alright, so now I have a tip. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to make it where we have to select the delivery date, and we're just simply going to pop up on the screen whatever the delivery date is. So we're going to do a message box. And so I'm going to come back over here, and this date time picker needs to have a name. And so the question is, what are we going to call it? Alright, so our date picker is going to be a DTP for a date time picker, and I'll call it delivery date. Alright, so there's my date time picker delivery date, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do a message box that pops up at the very end after it calculates the total, and display the delivery date in a text box. Okay, sorry, not a text box, a message box. Alright, so what we're going to do is message box dot show, and then what are we going to display? We're going to display the delivery date as text. Okay, so what I need to look at is DTP delivery date dot, and then what do I have available to me? Do I have a text value? Oh, I do. Okay, so now what I can do is I can give it a title of delivery date, and then we're going to display this text on the screen with the title of delivery date. Okay, so here's our pizza store. We select $8 for pizza. They want it delivered on Thursday. They're going to give a $2 tip. Calculate the total. And there we go. Delivery date is Thursday, November 19th, 2015. All right, so have one more little thing that I need to show you how to do, which is how to use a menu strip. All right, I'm going to close out of here, and I'm going to come up here to, actually we'll close out the pizza store, we don't need this anymore. We're going to go to FRM Mains Designer, and I want to select all of this, and we're just simply going to move it down. And what I want to do is I want to add a menu strip up here at the top. Now a menu strip is what we're used to seeing as things like file and help and edit and so forth. So we're going to start off just with the file menu. Alright, so I'm going to have file, and then under file we normally see things like open, you'll have save, we'll have save as, and then you usually have exit. And then we're going to have a help menu here, and this help menu is going to be about. We'll just have it as about. Okay, so now what I want to do is when I run my program, I'm going to have this menu that shows up at the top, but it actually doesn't do anything because we haven't actually entered any code for it yet. But if I select them, I actually have these. But what we're used to doing is we're used to being able to press the Alt key on our keyboard, and then things show up, and some of these be underlined. And to get the underline, I actually have to specify. I have to specify what the underline belongs to, and we're going to do that with a special character. Alright, so what I'm going to do is for file, I want to rename this, and I'm going to put an ampersand right in front of file. And notice when I put the ampersand, now I get an underscore here for F. Now I'm going to do the same thing for open. I'm going to put an ampersand in front of it, and by the way, I'm just simply clicking on it and then clicking on it a second time. Now you'll notice with save, we usually have S as the character that we use, but for save as, it's usually the A. So I'm going to put the ampersand in front of the A here. And then for exit, usually it's before the X. Alright, so then our help menu, I'm going to put an ampersand in front of the H, put an ampersand in front of the A, and there we go. So now what I can do is if I press the Alt key on my keyboard, I now get a menu, and now if I press F, the file menu pops up. And if I press X, then it goes to exit. Well, exit really doesn't have anything coded for it yet. Alright, so I want to go ahead and code these. The only ones we're going to use for right now are going to be the actually just exit and about. We will start playing with these more in future lessons. But what I want to do is I want to code it so the exit button exits the program. And I want to code the about button so that it will actually show me information about the program. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on about, and it created an about tool strip menu item. And so what this does is it will actually allow me to create some code for this menu strip item. And in this case, I'm going to do a message box.show. And this program was written by Brian Pringle. And then we'll have a title of about. Okay, so now what happens is when I run the program, when I go to help and about, it gives me a message box. This program was written by Brian Pringle, which is actually the same thing as our say hello button, because we're trying to do the same code. Alright, so I want to exit this thing, and the way that I exit is I double click on it, and then when I double click on it, it actually will give me my code here, and I want to exit this particular program. So what I can say is this dot, and you'll see you have a whole bunch of things that you can play with here, and the one in particular that I want to play with is close. Now close is actually a method, so I have to include the parentheses here, and what it will do is it'll close on my program. So when I start it, file, exit, now it exited the program. So it's the same thing as me actually making the program where you click the X and you exit out of it. In this lesson, you learned that the control class provides definitions for GUI objects such as forms and buttons. Most of this code is generated for us automatically through the IDE. We're going to use the font class to change the appearance of text on the forms. We'll play with link labels, which allow our labels to become links, such as a hypertext link to go to another web page or to open a particular program or file. We can play with colors. Checkboxes allow us to select each individual checkbox, and more than one of those can be checked at a time. Remember that the radio buttons, only one in a group can be selected, whereas the checkboxes, more than one can be selected. A picture box is used to hold pictures. A list box, combo box, checklist box, and a list control are all used to have a list of text items, and if we select our list box or checklist box, we actually can select more than one item at a time. We can use the month calendar and the date time picker to be able to select dates and times on our forms. When we put a control on the form, we can move it around to wherever we want, but we're going to put them inside of what's called a container object, and each container object will have container controls, and that's that little arrow that shows up at the top of a lot of our different types of containers. We can use a menu strip for most of our programs, and whenever we make a menu strip, we should try to put it in the standard form that people are used to seeing. So they're used to seeing file, edit, and then at least the help. And then there are a lot of other controls that are available.